big production. Good afternoon. My name is Cindy Siegel. I'm the chairman of the Harris County Republican Party. I want to thank you for being here today. Earlier today, before noon, the Harris County Republican Party filed a lawsuit with a breach of contract against Isabel Longoria, the Harris County election administrator, in regards to the 2022 primary that was just conducted. You know, it's been amazing listening to the news and to see what the Democrat elected officials have said and what Isabel Longoria has said. You know, the focus continues to be about it's always someone else's fault. Why the most egregious mismanagement of an election process to ever occur in the history of Harris County under Isabel Longoria's leadership. It's amazing that it's the voters' fault, it's the presiding judge's fault, it's the paper ballot's fault, it's Senate Bill 1's fault, and no one down at Isabel Longoria's office is taking responsibility for what really was truly mismanagement of the election process. Now, just to remind you, Isabel came into an unelected position to run the elections, to make them, quote, more efficient. And this was because Lena Hidalgo sold this idea of an election administrator to the Harris County public. Well, I can tell you what happened last Tuesday was anything but efficient. And that's the reason that we filed the lawsuit. Our goal is to make sure that this does not happen again. There are 3 more elections this year. May 7th is a local election, followed by the May 24th primary, and then, of course, the general election in November. So what we hope to come out of this is where either Isabel Longoria and her management team resigns or they're fired, but more importantly, that the courts actually step in and provide independent oversight over the election process to ensure that built-in processes, controls are put into place to ensure that people can do what they're supposed to do. That means that a voter can actually go vote, know that the machines are going to work, know that they're going to get the right paper size in terms of their ballot, know that they're actually going to get a ballot that they're supposed to have, and to be able to scan it and have it recorded correctly, accurately, and counted timely. Now, the Democrats last week would tell you that we were fear-mongering and that all the votes were correct, there were no problems. Late Saturday night, although we weren't notified, there was we found 10,000 unexplained, unrecorded mail-in ballots. There are serious problems with this process. So if the local Democrat elected officials won't do anything to restore the faith of the Harris County voters in our election process, then the Harris County Republican Party will. So I'm going to turn it over to our attorney, Steve Mippy, and he can address the legal issues.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Stephen Mitby, and I'm representing the Harris County Republican Party in its lawsuit against Elections Administrator Isabel Longoria. We filed this lawsuit because we found out over the weekend that Isabel Longoria misrepresented to the court last week that she had finished counting all of the ballots. She told the court that they'd finished the vote count, and then for reasons that have not been explained to us, she found another 10,000 ballots over the weekend that have not been counted. This is extremely disappointing and calls into question the integrity of the entire election system in Harris County. In fact, Harris County, under the leadership of Lena Hidalgo and Isabel Longoria, is making Chicago look like they know what they're doing in running elections. So we filed a lawsuit this morning so that we can find out exactly what went wrong and make sure that nothing like this ever happens again. It is time to bring Lena Hidalgo and her unelected bureaucracy of election administrators under court supervision to make sure that the election process is fair, that every vote is counted, and that people in both parties, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, have the opportunity to vote and to have their vote counted. That's what didn't happen this last time along, and it's time to hold these people accountable. Now, we expect great resistance. We don't think that Harris County is going to play fair, open the books, and tell us the truth about what happened. But you know what? That's what the court system is for. So we're going to get to the bottom of this one way or another, and we're going to find out exactly what Lena Hidalgo and Isabel Longoria did to mess up this election process for so many voters who earnestly came out, Democrats and Republicans, to try to cast their ballots. Thank you.
So a man that needs no introduction, Senator Paul Bettencourt.
Thank you. In 40 years of being involved in elections in Harris County, I've never seen anything like we've actually witnessed since really starting Saturday before the election. We have an election administrator that has no experience, that has already proven to be disingenuous, and that person called both political parties to say, we're not going to get you election equipment. We are not going to get you election equipment on time. That proceeded to escalate to her saying to the Secretary of State and both political parties on an open a phone call that she could not count the ballots by 7 o'clock deadline on Wednesday. Then she proceeded to tell the court multiple times she could. The lawsuit was filed, fortunately, and I hope there's a motion, I believe, Steve, that you made a motion back into Judge Phillips' court to reopen that case, because clearly the facts weren't represented correctly in the case that the count had actually occurred. Now, what's totally outrageous to me, and I've never seen this before, is that an election administrator dumps bad news at 10:30 at night on a Saturday without talking to either political party chair, and they're the ones that contracted with her to do the election. She posted, and you can see it on Team Bettencourt, a notice that said, oops, we found 10,000 ballots, and hadn't called either political party chair. That is completely disingenuous behavior by what's supposed to be the chief elections officer of the third largest county. That should never happen. It can't be tolerated. And as a result, there's two motions now filed by the Republican Party today, one for Judge Phillips and a new lawsuit. Oh, but there's another lawsuit already filed by another group that's got bipartisan plaintiffs asking for a recount. And all of this is because of incompetence, inexperience, disingenuous behavior of Lena Hidalgo's hand-picked election administrator. She must go. The elections in November are critical. If we had this type of problem, there'd be 100,000 votes that wouldn't have been counted. And technically, any vote after 7 p.m., okay, if it was a day vote, couldn't be counted on that day. Now, there's going to be litigation for some time. My message to the Commissioner's Court Democrats, you've got other people that can do this job. Get somebody competent in it before it's too late. In May, we have two elections that we have to run, a repeat runoff of both political parties, and a very complicated local agenda-driven election with statewide property tax issues that has to function. But I have no confidence, and I don't think the vast majority of election judges of both parties have any confidence in their current election administrator. So this is legal action's already taking place. It's up to Commissioner's Court to make a change. This whole idea of putting in what was supposed to be a high efficient, nonpartisan election administrator is a complete mirage. It's a total fantasy, because what we got is an agenda-driven, leftist, progressive person that does not know her own business and does not know how to conduct elections. And by any measurement I understand, that no one can argue with that. The question is how to go forward so we have elections in this county that the public, the political parties, and every citizen can trust the outcome. And you can't do it by saying, oops, I found 10,000 votes on Saturday night after the newscasts were already closed. That's not the way to build public confidence. And then ducking interviews for a day. I still don't think she's done an interview yet. Well, it's time for her to either resign or for her to be fired. Thank you.
So questions?
What about future elections? Do y'all have any trust in her that she can put on future elections? And what should voters know about that?
Absolutely no trust at all. That's why we filed the lawsuit. That's why we're requesting that she be fired or she resigns, and her management team. And additionally, we believe that there needs to be independent oversight over the election process for the next 3 elections, including a potentially May 7th runoff and also the general election. You know, I would not suggest coming 60 days from the May 7th election to say you need to clean house if it weren't so egregiously mismanaged. And I think the only way to restore people's confidence, both parties, is to show that there is independent oversight and that processes are going to be put back in place. There will be controls, there will be chain of commands where when people go to sign out the voting equipment and the ballot paper and sign it back in, that they actually sign for it. That wasn't done. That people can have confidence when you go to vote that the machines are going to work, or they're going to get the right size paper. Or imagine our surprise. We would like you to actually get the ballot that you're supposed to be voting on. That's not too much to ask. And I think every person that lives in Harris County, every voter has to want that, no matter what party they're affiliated with.
If the election administrator and their team is removed as you're seeking, do you have trust that someone can be put in place in time for that runoff?
Well, it's going to require a lot of work by the county as well as both parties. And what I would suggest is independent oversight, either via the court and or the Secretary of State, and that both parties locally have input and sort of boots on the ground where they're involved in that process to ensure the integrity going forward and the management, that people know that it's going to work, that they know when they go to vote that their vote's going to be counted.
So it sounds like you're asking for someone else to replace her?
I'm asking for her and her team to be replaced. But that's not good enough. I think we have to go a step beyond, and that's to have someone totally independent from the county, not affiliated with the Republican Party or the Democrat Party, that we have someone that can bring the voters' confidence back, that there will be a properly managed election process in Harris County.
Do you think there will be enough time to put someone in place?
You know, it's going to be tight. I mean, I thought long and hard. A lot of you know I'm a CPA. I deal with deadlines. If it hadn't been so egregiously mismanaged, we wouldn't be suggesting that this close to an election. I mean, the reality is I tried to come up with things that I thought went right. And I could only come up with 2 things. One, we were very pleased by the Republican turnout. And the second is, which in this day and age is a lot of people are surprised, but both parties really tried to work together on election day, going into election day, helping each other. Republican election judges were giving, the correct paper to the Democrats and vice versa. If one of the voting machines went down and they had an extra, there was a bipartisan effort to really make sure that the election came off. But that didn't come from the election administrator's office.
And let me add to that, because not only did it not come from the election administrator, on public statements, she said that both political parties were stealing ballots and ballot boxes from each other. And that got rated a 0 out of 10 on a truth meter, because there was no stealing of ballot boxes between either Otis or Cindy's group. Everybody knows that. So why are we putting up with somebody that tries to blame the political parties for their bad performance. That's really what's happened here. And also I want to point out that in this election, the primaries offices of both the Republicans and the Democrats are paid for by the state. So there's primary staff like Margo, okay, Al and others that are here to watch the primary function. In November, we're not going to have either of the parties' primary staffs. They're gone. And we have to rely on one person who is singularly so that she has literally anti-leadership qualities from top to bottom to run the nation's third largest county's election with no background, no exposure to election law. And that's the person Lena Hidalgo put in the job. So they have to change their person. You know, and I mean, they took it away from elected officials that were doing, by any estimate, you know, the current county clerk has to be more competent than the election administrator. There will have to be Democrats, and I'm a Republican, but you have to recognize the obvious. Now, one final thing about Senate Bill 1. The only reason why we knew there was over 10,000 ballots is because of the reconciliation form that was part of SB 1. And that was offered, and that's also on Twitter at this point, okay, on Team Betancourt. So the amount of ballots were identified, but she still didn't stop her going to the court, Judge Phillips' court, and saying, I've completed counting them. She had to find it and then dump it Saturday night. And that's why I'm outraged. I'm outraged because there's no professional behavior that I've ever seen from an election administrator that comes close to that type of behavior. You cannot have a person without any professional ethics or any professional ability to tell the public the truth. And she proved that she doesn't have either one Saturday night.
Other questions?
So at this point, are y'all characterizing what happened here as pure incompetence, or is there any sense that this could have been it's done in some way to influence votes or to change any kind of outcomes?
Well, first, I think it was complete incompetence. And I think, you know, until we have this independent oversight, you know, you don't know what's underlying, you know, I mean, are we going to discover another, 10,000 votes or 15,000? Because nothing went right. Absolutely nothing. From equipment being broken to delivered to a place that wasn't even a poll, to missing cables so they couldn't set up, to the wrong ballot size, to the wrong ballots for voters. I mean, nothing went right.
Can I answer that question?
Sure.
I'm Alan Vera, Chair of Ballot Security. I am wrestling with a question that directly relates to your comment. The question is this: at what point does election incompetence become the perfect camouflage for election malfeasance? Incompetence because on equipment pickup day, dozens of judges, both Republican and Democrat, left the pickup point with no ballots at all to run the election, nothing. But at least as of right now, only Republican judges were given the wrong ballot size, so that their voters voting, okay, on the wrong ballot size, 10 to 13 of their votes off the edge of that 8.5 by 11 paper will never be counted. And there's at least 140 voters so far that we know of who lost those votes. On election day, scores of Republican and Democrat judges had to deal with equipment that didn't work. Duos wouldn't boot up. The scanners wouldn't scan. That was widespread. But it was only 3 Republican judges who got to their polls and found there was no equipment at all. Their voting equipment had been delivered to another location, which wasn't even a polling place. So the question you asked is a good one. At what point does election incompetence lead to election malfeasance? We'll keep digging until we find out.
Let me add a point about that as well. What started out as incompetence has now turned into a full-scale cover-up. Lena Hidalgo and her unelected election bureaucrats are on the run. They're hiding from the media. They don't want to tell the truth about what happened. And that's why we had to file a lawsuit, so that we can find out the truth and find out exactly why this election turned into such a fiasco. And we expect that they're going to resist discovery into that every step of the way. But we're going to keep following them until they sit for depositions and sit in court and answer questions under oath. We're going to put them under oath and make them explain what they did. And we're gonna get documents from them and make them produce that. But we don't expect this to be easy. We think they're gonna fight us because they are in full-scale cover mode.
Did you reach out to, the offices prior to the lawsuit or trying to get some answers?
We did before the first lawsuit, and the answers that we got were wrong. They were false. And so at this point, we need the people involved in this, including Lita Hidalgo, to testify under oath so I can question them and get to the bottom of what actually happened.
Any other questions?
Can we get sound in Spanish if possible? Or just
Mark.
We understand today the Harris County GOP filed a lawsuit against the election administrator. Kind of talk to us about that, the lawsuit itself.
Okay, mi español es un poquito chueco, pero lo voy a ver si puedo decir, pero vamos a ir a corte para ver si pudimos hallar lo que pasó, porque lo que hicieron, el Harris County Administrator hizo bastantes cosas mal, como poniendo máquinas en lugares que no estaban para la gente para votar, y también las máquinas no trabajaban y los papeles estaban mal para votar, deben de ser legal, estaban de letter size, y la gente no podía votar por unas personas porque no tenían el papel bien correcto para votar, y es porque estamos poniendo el lawsuit para coger a alguien que puede hacer las elecciones correctas, y para la gente, para cuando va a ir a votar, pueden votar sabiendo que su voto puede contar y que está bien y que todas las máquinas trabajan y las personas que están haciendo todas las máquinas y todas las elecciones que son correctos. Y esto es lo que pasó en esta elección. Bastantes gente no podían votar porque no tenían las correctas cosas.
That's good.
Thank you all.
Good job.
Do you have a copy of the lawsuit? I know y'all had something earlier. Do you have?
Yeah, we do have copies of the lawsuit.
And sir,
My name is Alan, A-L-A-N.